Growers pay quite a bit for canola seed, and so they're interested in getting it up as much as possible, and if they don't, then that affects how much herbicide they have to apply. It can affect yield, and it can also affect canola quality at the end with more green seed and things such as that. We were most interested in seeing across several Western Canada locations what the impact of seeding at high versus low speed and shallow versus deeper depths. And so the high speed was about 7 miles an hour and the low speed was 4. And the depths were ½ inch or about 1 centimeter and a little over 2 inches at 4 centimeters. Pretty well across most locations and years, we got better emergence, seeding shallow at 1 centimeter, and that wasn't always the case in extremely dry conditions where we're trying to seed, where we would leave the seeds stranded without moisture when it was too shallow. We had some exceptions to that. We were surprised that we really didn't get big emergence differences in terms of actual emergence per seed planted in terms of hybrids versus OP, but where we did see the hybrid do better was it matured a little earlier. It also filled the canopy a little more quickly, put on more green tissue and competed with weeds better. Seeding speed was less of an impact than seeding depth, but when we got up around 7 miles an hour, sometimes the back shanks were covering what was seeded by the front at that high speed, and so we actually got a seeding depth effect on every other row. So generally, seeding higher, although it wasn't always a factor, it sometimes was a factor, and it usually meant that the seed got planted deeper than normal in every other row. We think that the important thing to consider is when you're paying that much for canola seed, as much as growers are, that they're careful to make sure they're not going too deep. And so it's just an adjustment in every different area of different fields for different soils to make sure they're not going too deep, because the deeper you go, less seed that's going to come up and the less cost effective your seed costs will be. Our recommendation from this study would be not to go necessarily by a recipe approach. If it's extremely dry, you may have to seed to moisture, but under most conditions, we'd recommend that you seed shallow, about ½ inch, and that you check when you go to a different field to make sure the seeder is set at that depth. And that will benefit yield. It can benefit the number of herbicides that you apply, because if you get a poor stand, you may need a second application that wouldn't have been necessary. And it can affect, we saw impacts on canola quality when we got more green seed because of light stands and canola trying to compensate for light stands later maturity.